Hello everyone, my name is Felipe and I'm a senior DevOps engineer here in Ireland. And today I'm here to talk about a little about a very introduction to Docker for people who doesn't even know what's Docker and how you can use Docker and how you can use it in your daily life to bring all the benefits of using containers, because containers makes our life easier and helps us in a lot of things. Um, as I can say, when I started to use containers, it helped me a lot, even from the development perspective and even from the DevOps perspective. So it helps a lot, and basically all the roles and all the jobs that you see today in the market, they are requesting people to know a little, not to be an expert in the containers and Docker and Kubernetes, but to know how to route to run a basic container and something like this. So basically, what is Docker? First of all, I think all of the people knows what is a container. Not in the detail, but like a kind of briefing what is containers and VMs, and but a lot of people tend to confuse what the difference between machines, the VMs, virtual machines, and containers, and they have a huge. It's not a huge difference, but they have a big difference that make them people that made a lot of people take the decision to go to the containers instead of going to the virtual machine like we did in the past. So basically, the machine, the virtual machine is an operational system that is going to run over a virtualization system on our infrastructure, so in our notebook, in our server, in our desktop. So we are going to launch a kind of virtualization operational system, so we can use like we can launch like a Windows, and in our Windows computer you can use launch an Ubuntu VM. So we can launch a lot of different operational systems as a virtual machine. But the problem here is that after the 2010, people and companies started to wonder how can they deploy and make apps and develop applications that can be run in every environment, with a less quantity of effort. You don't have to spend so much effort to make an application run in some environment or in some place. So, and what they found is that a lot of companies was using machine virtualization, was using virtual machines, and they found kind of difficult because every time you have to like deploy an application or even develop, you have to install like the virtual box or VMware for running, for creating a new image, or creating for existing image a new VM, and this takes a kind of time. And every time you have to install all the necessary libraries and binaries on your operational system, and this takes a lot of time, as I said, in order to you have your application up and running. And there was the big change here. It started when the people started to use containers, because containers, they also run, if you think about, yeah, the hardware and all the virtualization things that is happening under your processor and your notebook or your desktop. The mechanism behind this is looks like the same. It's not the same, but it looks like the same in the background. And what happens here is that, like the VM, the things, as I said, the things run on your hypervisor, and your virtualization thing in your processor. So, and also a good thing to say here is that a lot of processors in the market, most of them are from AMD. A lot of processors are that they don't have the capability of virtualization, so there are some machines that are not, you cannot run Docker properly. Of course, there are some workarounds where you cannot run Docker properly, but almost now the new machines the new notebooks, the new desktops and processors that are coming in the market, they basically they are able to run in a very like straightforward way Docker. So coming here to the containers, the huge difference here is that after your operating systems, in my case here is a MacBook, you have the computer engine. In our case today, we're talking about Docker, and we have our container engine who will take care of all the containers running in our computer. And what's make the big difference between the virtual machine is that the container is a kind of ready to go block. It's kind of a block where you have all the binaries and all the libraries already available, and you just run that. So you just with kind of one command, you put your container to run with all your dependencies, all your libraries, and the good thing is that you can run this on you can run the Docker on a Windows, you can run the Docker on your MacBook or in your Ubuntu. So imagine that you have deployed the Java application. If you are using a Docker container, you can deploy this Java application in the Windows and Ubuntu and whatever the operation system you want. So basically, that's the great quality and the big thing about containers, because you have everything in kind of just a block. So you have all the dependencies, the binaries and libraries and all those things, and you don't need to install another operational system like you have in VM. Of course, there is a lot of more difference, more of details, but you can keep this for a next thing in a next conversation. So after this, how can I install Docker? You can. I will not say here how can install Docker in each of the operational systems, but it's kind of straightforward. You just have to start to download the Docker file, the Docker execution file for installing if you are using Windows, or for MacBook and Ubuntu it's easier, but for Windows you might have some problems with Hyper-V, which is the virtualization systems of the processors. So if you had this, there's a lot of documentations in the Docker website that helps you fixing those problems, but you just have to install it. It's easier, and after install you just have to restart your PC and make sure that your Hyper-V it is running, it is good, so you can run your container. And after that, let's go to Docker, and basically let's talk first about network, because it's a great thing about the Docker. It is an important thing to talk is that when you launch a Docker container, the Docker container it is inside. If you talking like it is not the easy as say, but you can say that your Docker container is running inside your infrastructure, in the case your notebook, and but it has a different environment. When you run a new container, the Docker is a different environment from your own environment for your own notebook environment. So which means is that your Docker engine and has a dedicated network for the Docker for the containers. So which means that imagine that you have your local network here within your notebook, and if you don't open ports on your containers, you will not be able to access them, because basically they are in a different network. And if we take a look here, when you one important thing is when we launch containers on the Docker, it is to keep in mind what is the network driver and the network type that we are going to launch our container. So basically in Docker we have the bridge, network, the host network, and also the node network. Those two ones we're not going to detail today, but those the three main ones is bridge, host, and node. And this is very important to specify because a lot of people knows how to run Docker containers but doesn't know the relationship between your local network and the Docker network because this might be different things. So the bridge is the default network driver, and what the bridge is, basically you have your computer network and you have the Docker network. And what is the bridge? The bridge is when you are allowed to open ports from your PC to your Docker container. So you basically map ports from your PC, from your notebook, from your desktop to the ports from inside the Docker network. Uh, so it is a very common case. Every time you see a Docker run command, you might see a p argument with the port that you are mapping in the Docker container, and generally it's two ports. First is the port of your notebook of your desktop, and the second one is the port of the container that you are going to map. And after that, you have the host network driver, which is it is for kind of for standalone containers. It's when you don't have so much containers running together. So when you use host, you kind of remove this isolation of the network, and you can say that the Docker network becomes the same network as your computer. So imagine that we are running a MySQL database on the port 3306. And if you configure your container as a host network driver, you don't need to create a port mapping. You just have the port of your notebook network, the 3306, will be directly available inside your Docker container. So, which basically you don't have this like two networks separated. And now it is a very I don't know if many people use this, but it's a very uncommon way and network driver when you disable all networking. And it's basically when you want like just an instance running a job by the instance. You don't need a communication with the instance. So okay, so those are the network drivers. And after that, let's take a look in some Docker commands. Uh, you don't need to memorize this, but those are commands that you can press and take a look in your daily. Only to that are because they are common commands for Docker. So the first command is Docker ps, and this command here basically shows you all the processes that Docker is running, basically all the containers that is currently running. You have also Docker image, which show all the images that we have. Here I have a lot of images, but if you just install in our computer, you are not going to have any image. Also, we have Docker run, which makes we run our container. Also, we have Docker push and Docker pull for pulling or pushing image to some of container image registry. And now we are going to run a MySQL on the Docker. So to you guys see how it's easy to run something in the Docker. And so imagine that, and the good thing about running a MySQL on the Docker is, imagine that you were developing an application and you need a MySQL. Instead of going to the MySQL website, installing the MySQL and installing everything, you just can run the Docker command and install the MySQL on your machine and start it to run. And that's even better when you have a lot of applications running together and you need a lot of different databases. you can run multiple databases easily with Docker. And if you haven't had Docker, that would be kind of difficult. So we can run the command docker run, and basically we will going to do first the port, as I said. So for what I'm doing here is this command is the -b argument is saying that I'm going to use the bridge network driver, and basically here I'm saying that I'm mapping the port 3306 from my local network, from my computer network, to the port 3306 of the Docker network. So okay, now I will pass the name. We are going to name as MySQL as a, but it's okay. Now I'm going to pass an argument and an execution argument to the MySQL, which is MySQL root password, which we'll put as default. So that's argument here. -e is basically the one command that we want to send to the container before running that, or in the middle of the execution. So we can set the MySQL root password just in the beginning. And now I'm using -d, which is the detach command. And what's the detach? If I run a Docker without this -d argument, what will happen is that the Docker will log everything to you and will append the process of the container to your current tab. So when you run -d, it's kind of a no hop that you just append the process to another process, and you can still use your tab, your command prompt here, your bash. So and now we are going to say, of course, the image. And the good thing here is that you just it's a simple name. It's just image. It's just of course that image has tags. So if you want to specify a version of MySQL, you can take a look and search in the Docker repository about the images and all the versions that they have for MySQL. But here, if I can say I have already the image on my local. So basically, when I run this command, they are just going to put the process here. But if I run docker ps here, I can see that now my Docker container is running, and it is saying the image, the ID, also the time that when it was created, the status. So it's saying that's up. It is not. So everything is good with our container. And the ports here is the important part that we were talking about. So it is basically mapping the 0000. It's the range of IPs of our local network. Is mapping the 3306 port from our local network to the 3306 of the Docker network, and of course based on TCP. And the name of the container is MySQL. So if I try to connect in MySQL, I will try. Oh, I know why it's not working. I'm missing that command here. User. Now, as you guys can see, we connected. So I just used the MySQL command line interface, and I'm using the user root, my password. And then when I was prompted for the password, I just entered the default password that we defined when we run the container. The host is my local one, and the port for connect to the database is 3306. So as you guys can see here, uh, we are we are in the MySQL and we are connected. And as you guys can see, it's very easy to run. And if you want to stop your Docker container, you just have to put Docker stop MySQL. And if you want to delete your Docker container, you just have to do Docker rm MySQL. So that's the good thing about Docker, as I said, because you can create as many containers as you want just with the command that we just executed. This one, you can modify the part here, this part here, and you can basically execute as many MySQLs as you want, that don't consume so much as memory as the local MySQL that you can run through the MySQL website installer. So that's very good when you are developing and you need a lot of databases running on your local. And that's the MySQL case, but you can run a lot of things on with Docker, and Docker can help you in a lot of things and a lot of fast tasks. So you can even run. And one of the things that it is good that I do, that it helps me a lot in Docker, it is using the Docker for running Ubuntu, because basically when I'm doing shell scripts for my job, and sometimes the commands that runs on MacBook doesn't run, has some slight difference from the Ubuntu. And in the background is Bash running in a shell script, of course, but sometimes, like for example the set command, there are some slight stages between the set of Ubuntu and the set of Mac. And one of the things is that is good, instead of creating a virtual machine in Ubuntu, logging to Ubuntu and testing this script on Ubuntu, I just have I can just deploy a Docker container here on Ubuntu and just SSH into that container. The good thing, let's do it now. I don't know if the MySQL has an embedded container operational system inside that, but we can execute this command here, which is docker exec minus it, and we are going to say which container that we want the MySQL container, and want to say which that we want to connect SSH using Bing Bash. So yeah, so as you can see now, we have SSH into our container. So that's good, because going back to our example that I said, we can basically run whatever we want in the Docker. And this case of Ubuntu is very good, because when I want to just test the shell scripts on Ubuntu, just SSH into the Docker container and run there. It's very fast and doesn't take me time to install a virtual machine. So that's it for today. That is it, and I hope all you guys like this and like this introduction. I'm hoping that in the future I can bring more detail and more things, and also bring things regarding Kubernetes. But for the moment is it, and thanks a lot.